Hi, this is Rob Packard from Medical Device Academy. Today's live session is about how to conduct a mock FDA inspection, when you should conduct a mock FDA inspection, and who is qualified to do that mock FDA inspection. This month, our topic that we're covering is FDA inspections. We're trying to help our clients prepare for FDA inspections. And on the 26th, Monday the 26th, we're going to be giving a paid webinar on the topic of how to prepare for an FDA inspection. We're also going to be bundling that with our new work instruction on how to prepare for an FDA inspection. So if you're interested in that webinar and you want to get that work instruction so you can use it in your company and use the training for your company on how to conduct FDA inspections, what questions to ask when the FDA first calls you the week before they're going to show up, or maybe the Friday before they show up, what the receptionist in your lobby should do when the FDA inspector arrives, what they shouldn't do, and where you should put the FDA inspector and how long you should make them wait, and how you should conduct yourself throughout the FDA inspection. So those are the things that we're going to be discussing in that paid webinar on, I think it's noon on the 26th and Monday of July. But today's session, we're going to be talking about mock FDA inspection, and that's what you would do in preparation for an eventual FDA inspection. Companies will typically have an FDA inspection every couple of years. Every other year is the FDA's goal for routine inspections. And then if you're a foreign firm, they usually don't get to it as frequently, and it's usually once every 3 years. It's all risk-based. And right now we're going through a weird transition period where the FDA is doing their inspections in sort of a catch-up mode. Which companies are in the worst shape? Which ones have had the most problems? Because they weren't doing any inspections during the COVID pandemic. And now that the pandemic is winding down, now they're allowing inspections again, and they're visiting companies. They've said they're going to resume their normal routine schedule in the fourth quarter of this year. But we've already had one of our clients get inspected by an FDA inspector recently, and it was a follow-up inspection. So this wasn't a routine inspection. This was a follow-up. They had already received an inspection, and they had received 483s, so the FDA was checking up on that. And that was highly unusual because normally they would only do that for warning letters, or if there were a recall, or if there were a medical device reporting. And so in this case, by the FDA prioritizing them for inspection before they did inspections of other companies that have warning letters, that's an indicator that they're concerned about that client, and they may be issuing a warning letter in the very near future here. So that's an important thing to note. If you're getting inspected now, that's not necessarily a good thing. But we do have one client of ours that recently hired us to do a mock FDA inspection of their facilities in preparation for a PMA. And that's a more proactive approach. If you're a foreign company and you get notified, hey, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to be coming to your facility and doing an inspection, then that would be an appropriate time to immediately get somebody in there and do a mock FDA inspection. But you want to make sure the person's qualified to do it. It's not just any auditor, not just anybody that knows the QSR requirements, but somebody that knows how the FDA works and can prepare your team. So part of the job is doing like an audit. It's a mock FDA inspection is what we call it, but it's like an audit, and it can serve as an audit for your company. But at the same time, you should expect when somebody's going to do a mock FDA inspection, they're going to spend some time training your company as well. So as a debrief at the end of each day, or immediately after finishing interviewing somebody, they want to give that person feedback so the person knows how to respond to the FDA. You're not necessarily coaching them on what to say, but how to say it, and what things to say and what things not to say, and making sure the person is a little bit more relaxed and prepared for it, rather than you don't want them to catch the FDA inspection cold and be unprepared and very worried about it. So those are some of the things to think about when you're hiring somebody to come in and do a mock FDA inspection. But this company, with any pre-approval inspection or PMA, you're going to have the FDA schedule 2 types of inspections. One is going to be for your manufacturing process, and one is going to be for your clinical data. So they're going to be doing those two. The manufacturing process, they'll also look at complaints and CAPAs and other processes. But if your product isn't out in the field yet, there's really the focus will be on your manufacturing. And this is really important because a PMA product is generally a higher risk product. So they're going to be much more attentive to you have the appropriate controls in place. And if you're doing a PMA product, you need to understand that in the PMA world, you don't just make changes. Things aren't just letters to file, and they aren't just a design change that you make and sign off on. For PMAs, you have a supplement that you have to submit, and sometimes you need pre-approval of the changes. Even changes as simple as I'm going to change what type of measurement I'm going to use. So before I was using a ruler, and now I'm going to use this laser gauge. Even though the new method might be better, you don't just make the change. You either notify the FDA or you get approval prior to making the change. This is true for suppliers as well. Even component suppliers, not just contract manufacturers, but component suppliers, you have to either a notification or a pre-approval. So the PMA world is much tougher. You have to get approval of it. It's even tougher than a class 3 in Europe where you have pre-approval by a notified body. When you have a device that's being approved under a PMA in the US, you have much stricter controls over any changes of any kind, especially labeling. So if your company has said, okay, either we're being inspected by the FDA and they're coming in the next 6 to 8 weeks because we're a foreign company, we're outside the US, or you have a PMA pre-approval inspection that's going to be this fall, that now's the time to be scheduling that inspection so you're ready and you can address any corrective actions that are needed prior to them showing up. Or third case scenario, you expect you're going to be inspected sometime this fall or in 2022. Now's the time to be scheduling that mock FDA inspection. And how would you know? Well, if you listen to last week's live video, you would know if you were inspected if you had a routine inspection in 2019, you weren't scheduled for being inspected in 2020, you would normally get inspected in 2021. But if you had a good inspection, they'll probably postpone it till 2022 at least, and maybe even 2023, because the companies that were supposed to be inspected in 2020 will be a higher priority. They'll get inspected at the end of this year and the beginning of next. And the companies with problems are going to be the priority for 2021 as they ramp up the inspection by ORA again. So let's start with when should you schedule this, and what type of agenda should you have for a mock FDA inspection? So when it's got to be at least soon enough that you can implement some corrective actions before you're going to have an actual FDA inspection. So if you have a pre-approval inspection scheduled next month, it's probably too late to really do much. I'm not saying don't do it, but you're not going to get nearly the value you could have. If you're going to be having one in the fall, you're going to get a lot more value out of it. If you have one 6 to 8 weeks from now, it's really tight. You have to get that person in right away, and you're going to have to really scramble and provide resources and try to take any corrective actions before that actual FDA inspection occurs. But when you're going to schedule a mock FDA inspection for an inspection that may happen in 2022, anytime this year will work, and you could even pick January. In general, try not to pick holidays. Try not to pick when people are on vacation. Try to pick slower times of the year. So January, February is a great time to schedule people because everybody tries to get stuff done by the end of the year. And so usually auditors and inspectors have some time left over in January and February where they don't have a lot scheduled. So that's a great time to schedule somebody. In general, the busiest time of the year is September through Christmas time for most companies. So those aren't the best times to do it. This particular client, they're scheduling something in the month of August. So we're able to fit it in. It just happened to work out where they're not on vacation, I'm not on vacation. So we worked out something in August, and they'll have their pre-approval inspection in the fall. And so that should work out well for them. The next question you want to be asking is, well, what are they going to cover? How is this different from an internal audit? And one of the things that's different is you're going to be, the person that you're going to be having do this, they're going to be focusing on what an FDA inspector would look at. So they have to be familiar with the QAzip manual. They have to know what the 4 major processes are. So CAPA is your first one. Production process controls is your second one. Design controls is your third process. And your 4th major process is your management controls, such as purchasing and management reviews. So those are your 4 major processes that the FDA is going to focus on. And there's 3 other minor processes that are incorporated in that. But they'll look at those 4 major processes. So you need somebody that knows that QAzip manual and will look at those 4. Does that mean that when they audit CAPA for their mock FDA inspection, that they can't look at CAPA and call it an internal audit? Absolutely not. But you really want 2 different focuses. This is how the FDA would do it, and this is how you want to do it for an internal audit, whether it's for MDSAP or a certification body or just to be compliant. You're going to look at it a little differently, and what you might write up as a mock FDA inspection report as an auditor might be a little different from the report that you might want to show a notified body, which is going to have all the requirements for that certification. So I might actually generate 2 separate reports, an FDA inspection report or a mock FDA inspection report and an MDSAP audit or an ISO 13485 audit or just a general quality system or CE marking audit. We have different criteria too. If you have a certification body coming in, if it's for Canada, it's going to be an MDSAP audit. So I have to audit to MDSAP. And there's a companion document that I'm supposed to follow and a checklist. If you're CE marked, then I need to follow either the MDR or the IVDR. If your company is going to be selling in other countries, such as Australia or Japan or China, there might be regulation for each of those countries that apply. But if I'm worrying about an FDA inspection, I just need to focus on 21 CFR 820, 803 for medical device reporting, 806 for recalls or corrections and removals, 830 for UDI, and 801 for labeling. You also might get into Part 11 compliance for electronic signatures if that applies to your business. You might get into 812, 21 CFR 812 for investigational device exemptions. So not everything will necessarily apply to all companies, but somebody should be able to rattle those off just like I did or better. When that person is looking at it, usually the sequence is first they look at the procedure, then they look at some sort of log that you might have, and then they'll do a sampling of records based on the log. And if, like, one of the most common areas that you would get 43s in, if you read the blog and saw the video that we posted this week, Matthew Walker wrote a great blog on what are the most common areas that you can get from the FDA's inspection database, in that those FDA 43 inspection observations. The most common are CAPA, complaints, MDRs or medical device reporting of adverse events. And the last one, which I accidentally deleted, sorry, Matthew, I deleted like 1,000 words of your writing. That last one is purchasing controls. So those are the 4 top areas. The 3 that get hit all the time are the CAPA, complaint, and MDR, and the 4th one is purchasing controls. So if I were an FDA inspector, those are the areas that I would expect a 43 in. So as a mock FDA inspector going in there and simulating that scenario, I'm going to look at your CAPA process, your CAPA log, and then I'm going to look at the CAPA records and I'm going to sample those. And I want to do a rigorous sampling of those because I know that's a high frequency area for getting 43s. The second place I'm going to look at is the complaint process. So complaint handling procedure, complaint log, and I'm going to look at complaint records. I'm going to sample lots of those. I'm going to also look for anything that might have been a complaint that you didn't characterize as a complaint. So you said this isn't really a complaint. We're going to fix this, but we're not going to record it as a complaint. The FDA looks for that. So look deeply in service departments if your company does service. They specifically look for the phrase in your procedure that you will that oral communications also count. So anybody picks up the phone and tells somebody in customer service that they have an issue with a product, that alleged issue with the product meets the definition of complaint, and they want that in your procedure with that wording. So make sure you've used the right wording for the definition of a complaint and you're not missing any. The third area is going to be MDR. So even if you don't have any medical device reporting that you had to do, you have a class 1 device that's perfectly safe, you've never had any injuries, you still need an MDR process. You still need a log to put them in if they get reported, if they were to get reported. You won't have any records of an actual MDR, but in order to create the electronic submissions gateway, you had to create a sample one. So you should at least have a sample one. And the best training out there will actually go through some examples and pick real world potential adverse events that could occur for your product. So anybody that's in the complaint handling unit should know immediately, oh, that's one of our examples. That could be an MDR. So those are the things a good FDA inspector will be looking for in the MDR process. And then last but not least, purchasing isn't just a yes, that's also important issue. It's particularly important now. And the reason why is one of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we had a lot of supply chain interruption and it affected ventilators. So they're looking for how have you adjusted your supplier controls to adjust for those interruptions in the supply chain. Companies that couldn't deliver, companies that delivered product in a rush, any quality problems that they experienced, any new suppliers that you added on board that you might not have approved or might have provisionally approved. They're looking for, did you revalidate any for those new suppliers and any impact it might have had on the design and function of your device? So they're going to look very closely at the supplier quality management process and supplier approval. However, you communicate those revisions to suppliers as you made changes to adjust to supply chain interruptions. So hi to one of our guests that said hello. It was great to have you join us last week, and I recognize you again this week. As I said, those are the 4 areas that I would focus on. But anybody that's going to do a mock FDA inspection, you can also have it be your internal audit. You can do both at the same time, but you have to have a skilled auditor, and you're probably going to want them to create 2 different reports. Here's one that has the 483s and inspection observations, and it's focused on the FDA requirements. And here's another one that is your entire quality system and all the regulatory requirements. We have a question here. Can you please tell US EU regulatory guideline for population health management software controlling critical health? I will have to write that down. So let me make a note here. It's a good question, but it's outside of the scope of this. So US EU regulatory guideline for population health management software controlling critical health. It would be fantastic to my guest that wrote the message there if you can shoot me an email. My email I'll put down below here for everybody. If you have any specific questions like this that are outside of the scope of this discussion, just shoot them to this email, and I'll be happy to respond. You're very welcome. And any other questions, if you have one specific to the area of mock FDA inspections, I'd be happy to answer it. Now, the second part of this that I wanted to cover, it's not just when should you have it and how should you manage that, but who should you hire to do this mock FDA inspection? So unless you have somebody that would be independent from your quality department that has tons of experience auditing and has been through a ton of FDA inspections, you probably don't have somebody internally that can do a mock FDA inspection. That might be able to look at a single area, but probably not for your whole entire business. And you really want to simulate what an FDA inspection is going to be like. In order to make sure that I got that kind of training, I did it 2 different ways. Number one, I made sure that I had gotten training on what is in the QAzip manual and what is required. So when I worked for BSI, they were trying to train people for the Accredited Persons Program. So I went through that training for the Accredited Persons Program. We never actually got observed by the FDA, but we actually went through a couple of mock FDA inspections for clients that were worried about PMAs. And so I got some experience on that with 2 different clients. In addition to that, after I left BSI and I started my own business, one of the things that I did is I went out there and I hired a couple of ex-FDA inspectors that were really, really good and did a lot of help with companies that were in trouble with the FDA. And so those 2 FDA inspectors, I learned a lot from them. And one of them, I actually went out and did FDA inspections or mock FDA inspections with them while we were supposed to also be doing an internal audit of that client. And so we did that for a fairly large orthopedic company. And I learned a lot from that FDA inspector. They had actually trained 28 other FDA inspectors during their career, so they were good at training other people. And so we actually taught some courses together on how to do auditing, what the FDA inspectors look like, so you could prepare your auditing team to be more like they are and look for the things that they do. So we had that as part of our training. And then in addition, he taught me some of the tricks. So over dinner, we would discuss things. And I learned a lot on the different tricks and of the trade that the FDA inspectors would use during their inspections, how they would take notes, how they would make sure that all the things that they had requested were followed up, how they would not telegraph what their intent was to the company that they were inspecting, what would be happening behind the scenes when they were talking with their boss, what things would trigger a company to be official action indicated and get a warning letter versus how some companies might avoid that warning letter based on their response to FDA 483s. So I learned a lot from that. So you should either be hiring an ex-FDA inspector, like one of those 2 people that I hired, or you should hire somebody like me that's been through an accredited persons program or has been trained by an FDA inspector. And so that's what you should really be looking for. The downside of hiring an ex-FDA person is they're not very strong in the ISO 13485 requirements. So if you want them to do both purposes, we want you to do a mock FDA inspection and meet the requirements of our MDSAP audit. They probably can't do it because they probably aren't trained on MDSAP or they probably aren't trained on CE marking. So there are a few out there that can do both, but they're a very rare breed. So you really want to look for, are we just focusing on FDA? So then an FDA inspector would be great. Or do we need somebody that can do both to get a little bit more value out of our money, because we also need to do internal audits? And then you want somebody that has both trainings. And you want to tell the person, what is my focus? Do I want to also be prepared for the FDA, or is that my number 1 priority is preparation for the FDA? And I also want to meet the requirement for an ISO audit, an internal audit. So those are the things that you should be looking for when you're going to hire somebody. Now we have a couple other questions. One of them is from BME Life. Is the FDA doing in-person inspections, or will they be remote? So the FDA inspection that our client actually had recently was in person. It wasn't remote. So yes, they are doing inspections in person. And that was the big thing that they had noted. They had been doing things remotely all along, all during 2020 and the beginning of 2021. Whenever there was a serious issue with a company or a follow-up to an MDR or a recall, they were doing those things remotely. But they can't do a PMA pre-approval inspection remotely. And when they have a serious issue with a client or a company and they feel it's necessary to go inspect them, they're going. So be prepared. This company did get an inspection, and they got it earlier than the FDA said they were going to, and it was out of order. So they were prioritized, and that's not a good thing. Boarding acts. Okay. Would you tailor a mock FDA inspection to the FDA's QAzip manual? Yes, I would. I don't ask every single question that is in the QAzip manual, because they literally have a playbook for you that tells you what questions to ask and how to do your sampling. So I've read the QAzip manual enough times and studied it enough that I can do 99% of that from memory. If there were a particular area that I was worried about, I would open up the QAzip manual as a reference, just like as an auditor doing an internal audit, I'd open up 1345 and go back and review it, or to open up 14971 as a guidance. So I will go back to the QAzip manual and look at things, but I know the sequence that the FDA inspectors use is they always ask for a copy of the procedure and they want to take a copy of that with them. They always look for a log. So do you have some sort of log of CAPAs and complaints and service records, purchasing POs? They look for logs because they want to get a copy of the log. That gives them a scope of all that's out there. And then a lot of times, because of the description that people will put in the log, they can cherry pick specific samples out of that log that look interesting to them. Other times they will be truly random and they will say, I'm going to pick every third one. And so that's 1/3 of the records get sampled. Other times they will do more of a statistical sampling of the group based on their QAzip manual. So I've seen all of the above. I've seen cherry picking the worst case examples that look interesting to the inspector that they think is something that is a concern just by the wording of it. And so they want to look at that. They will also look for every third sample they'll look at, and they'll also look at statistical sampling, and it'll be random. But one of the things that you should keep in mind that can reduce your sampling significantly in these inspections is whenever an inspector says to me, let me see your log, if you have it electronically and you can sort it, you might want to be saying to them, do you want to see all complaints, or do you just want to see the complaints related to a specific product or product family? This is a great question for a bigger company. If you only have one product, what's the point? Everything's going to be related to that one product. But if you have 20 different product lines, the FDA inspector is probably there to look at just one product line. That's what they typically do. They pick a product line, and that's the theme throughout the entire inspection. So you only need to provide records for that product line. So don't give them a log that has all complaints. Give them a log that only has the product lines they're interested in. So that's how, before you say, yes, I'll go get it and hand it to them, say, do you want all complaints? Do you want all CAPAs? Do you want all service records? Or do you want specifically ones for this product family or a product family, and let them tell you what the product family is. Once they've decided, then you can go sort that log electronically and just give them the ones they want. And most companies have electronic systems now where that's easy to do. And then you're just giving them a subset, and then they're going to sample from that. So you might have 200 complaints, but if only 20 of them are for that product line, and they're going to do a sampling of 20, they might only look at maybe 6 or 7 or 8 of these complaints instead of doing a sampling of 200. So you might see a much smaller sample taken, and they're going to focus on that product line. If it's a product line you have problems with, that's not good for you, but there's no way around it. But if it's a product line that's a good product line that you're not having problems with, that's great news. They're not going to look at this other one here that you are in danger of having a recall on. You're not purposely trying to hide things from the inspector. You're just thinking on your feet, and so in giving yourself a little chance to breathe and say, okay, deep breath. You want to see our CAPA log. Do you want to see all of our CAPAs, or do you just want to see for this product line? And they might ask a qualifying question. Well, how many do you have? Well, let me see. We have 187. Okay. And how many of those are for what product? So they might ask you to give them a breakdown, and they might pick the most popular. But oftentimes they'll have an agenda in mind, they'll have a product line in mind, and that will focus their inspection. So always ask for which product line or which product. That really helps you out a lot. Another thing that the FDA is going to do when they do an FDA inspection, they're not going to tell you whether things are good or bad. If anything, they'll tell you everything is good when it's not. They're actually trained to do that, not to telegraph to the person that this is likely to end up in a warning letter. Put them at ease so you can gather as much information as possible to put in your inspection report in case you have to take them to court. Once you tell them things are going badly and they're getting a warning letter, they're going to clam up and not going to be sharing anything, just because they're scared if no other reason. But the FDA is always looking for people that are trying to hide information, so you don't tell somebody up front that that was a bad interview and they're going to get a warning letter. So if I'm going to do a mock FDA inspection, I warn people of that. They're not going to tell you whether things are doing well or doing poorly. when I inspect them, when I do a mock FDA inspection, I smile and I try to put them at ease and everything, and I let them hang themselves with as much rope as I can. And then when we're done and I do a debrief, I'm like, okay, so here's the bad news. You shouldn't have shown me this record. You made this mistake. You did this wrong. Here's the good news. So I might use the old sandwich approach, tell you something good, then tell you the bad stuff, and then follow up with the good stuff. So you begin and end with good news. But the bad news is what's important, and that's what you need to open up a CAPA for. And so I'm going to tell you, hey, this is what you shouldn't have done. You shouldn't have just handed me your entire binder and let me play. Don't make my day easy and just give me every single thing that I could possibly ever look at. Don't hand them the binder that has Post-it notes on it and say, don't show this to the FDA inspector. We've actually seen that. You want to make sure that you take a look at the record before you give it to the FDA inspector. And so whoever you're going to hire, they should know these things, and they should prepare you for that, and they should train you, and they should be able to give you some practical advice to some of the hypothetical situations that you're worried about at your company. Okay, so we're past the 1 o'clock time, so I got to jump over to my team meeting for Medical Device Academy. Thank you very much for the 2 team members on my team that also joined in. Thank you for our guests from India as well, and I will look for your email and give you a response later. Any more detail that you can give me on that in the context would be greatly appreciated, because there's very different requirements for the US and very different requirements for Europe. So I'm trying to look for what you're looking for there so I can give you a proper answer. Any other questions that people have? Next Friday, next week I'm doing an internal audit for a client, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But on Friday, I'm going to be doing another live webinar at 12:30. And then the following week on Monday, the 26th, we're going to be having our live webinar on how to prepare for an FDA inspection. So if you want to tweak our topic next week a little bit, I don't have something specific other than generally we're covering FDA inspections. So let us know what you want to cover and put your comments down below. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want us to cover in the future. Or take a look at our new website. It's our new webpage. Sorry, I updated our page called Suggestion Box. So if you go to Medical Device Academy /suggestion-box, that's where you can put in a form, any questions that you might have. And we're going to be updating that page here in the near future. It's also our 404 page. So if you ever find a broken link and end up there, it's a broken link, so please let us know what you were really looking for so we can fix that broken link and get you the information that you were looking for. Thank you, and have a great weekend. See you next week live. Bye-bye.